morning, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to lecture 3 of our series as regards the reporting process. In this lecture today, what I want to address is the question of planning. Planning so that you can deliver the report in time. Now, when you have a particular project, particular exercise, to get it done properly and correctly, you need to do some planning. It is the same with the reporting process. Now, it might sound strange, but actually, when you deal with this planning, you start from the end, backwards, so to speak. In other words, what you do have is a deadline. As it stands now, the deadline is the 30th of June of this year. Therefore, your plan has got to keep that in mind first and foremost. Yes, that is the end date, but that is the date you have to take first into consideration when you're dealing with planning. So, date of delivery, or in other words, as we put it simply, deadline is of key importance here when you're dealing with planning. Now, planning of necessity has one key element. This is called organization. In other words, how you organize yourself. And the reporting is a process. It's not a one-day activity, it's not a one-moment activity, but it begins someplace and it ends someplace. And you have to have activities from the beginning, in between, right up to the end. Therefore, you have to organize the process. Fundamental to all of this is first and foremost leadership. Somebody has got to lead the process. If you don't have leadership, then it might end up chaotic and you might never ever get the report in. So somebody has got to lead the process. As it stands in the UNCCD process, as you know, the national focal point is the key connection between the country and the secretariat and between the country and the UNCCD process as a whole. So naturally speaking, it should be the national focal point who leads the process of getting the report in and getting the report in on time. Now, but that is only one person, or one institution. As you know, a national report requires information from different areas, from different subjects. It covers different issues. Therefore, a one-person operation might not necessarily work. So outside of leadership, you need to have some sort of organizational structure or some machinery which takes you from the beginning right down to the end of what you want to do. But before you put this machinery in place, before you decide what sort of machinery it is, you must know what the machinery ought to do. In other words, in this case, form follows substance. Form follows function. So you have something concrete that you have to do, and when you know what that is, then you put the machinery in place. What is the concrete thing you have to do? The concrete thing you have to do is to get a report. But what is this report all about? It is about providing specific information. It is about providing data. It is about providing information which we will use, all of us who are involved in this process, to further determine how the process should proceed. So the key issue here is delivering information, but not just information. It must be relevant information. It must be the correct information. It must be verifiable information, okay? So, and it must be total information. So because of all of this, you need to therefore have a sort of collection of this information. And this is the key issue here. How you get this relevant information, this correct information, this viable information, this total information, how you collect all of that and put that together so that you have a final product, which is called the report. Now, for you to have this information, of course, you have to have what is called sources. The information is out there someplace, and you have to have the source which provides you that information. Outside of that, you must have a means of doing that. In other words, the information is there, you want to collect it, but how do you do that? What means, what method do you use? Then you have to have personnel to help you do this. In other words, there are people who actually go about collecting the information. Apart from that, you need to tabulate or to count this and verify that it is correct. And finally, there is a cost involved towards that. So Now that we know what you ought to collect, we need to know how you do that. In other words, what are the capacities necessary for you to do that? First and foremost, of course, is personnel, the proper personnel. And as you know, you have in the UNCCD process, not just the focal point, but as regards the reporting, usually countries appoint a reporting officer. This must be a competent person who understands what this is all about and who can carry out the job most efficaciously. So we know, therefore, you need personnel. You need to have the proper human, so to speak, capacity. Now, sometimes also, a country doesn't just have a reporting officer, but they might have an assistant. But these are just two persons. And as I have explained earlier, there's a lot of information to be gathered from different parts. Therefore, apart from this human capacity, you need what is called institutional capacity. In other words, you must have some sort of machinery set up which will help you to collect this information from different parts. As I said before, and as you know, and as you will see, the report requires different information. This information will come from different parts of your country, from different institutions of your country, from different persons involved in the process. And therefore, because there are different information, different sources, there must be a sort of institutional framework or setup, a machinery which will help you bring all this information together. So apart from that, apart from having the institution, for the institution to work properly, there must be some sort of what? Coordination. You need to put all of this together. All of these people have to be able to work together. So finally, therefore, in most cases, especially in large countries, you will not just have a person, a reporting officer and an assistant, but you might need a body, right? So it's not just people, but an institution. But regardless of what you do, if there is no proper leadership to bring all of this together, to have all of this focused in a proper way, then it will not work. Some countries find it impossible or difficult because of limited capacity to do this themselves, or for the focal point to do it, or the reporting officer alone to do it. So sometimes people hire consultants. As I have told you before, and as you know, we have a list of consultants, more than 200, from all around the world, who speak at least 4 different languages, in 4 different languages. And you can check there if you should need a consultant. So now that we have all of that, you have the institution, you have the personnel, you know where the source of information is, and so on and so forth. Now you get down to actually making a plan. Now, in this sense, a plan should really be a roadmap. A roadmap which tells you, now that you have begun, right, how you get to the end. And you have to always remember, in this case, you have a deadline. So that is the key thing that you have to keep first and foremost. It's interesting. It's the last part, but it's the first thing you have to bear in mind, because you cannot go beyond that deadline. As it stands now, this might change, but as it stands now, as I've said before, the deadline is the 30th of June this year. Now, once you have that deadline in your mind, you then set out a roadmap. You set out how you plan to deliver this. And there are certain things you have to take into consideration. Timely delivery. To ensure this timely delivery, you must be very specific. So you have to have specific plans that you want to achieve, or specific parts of the plan that you want to achieve over specific time. That's the first thing. So for example, you say we will get 20% done by May 20th, we will get 40% done by May 30th, and so on and so forth. But a specific time frame which leads you to getting the report done by 30th June. Secondly, you need to ensure that you have specific personnel responsible. In other words, you need not just to say that, okay, somebody will do this, or anybody could do this, or, you know, everybody could do this. No, you have to have people specifically responsible for specific things. And as I've said before, you have to ensure not only that they are responsible, but that they are competent and able to do it. Outside of that, these people must be willing to allocate the time. They might be competent, they might be willing. But if they didn't allocate the time to do it, then you are in trouble, then you are in problems. So you need to have time allocation. But outside of that, you have to be constantly checking. In other words, you said that 20% should be done by 20th May. When 20th of May comes, you should be able to check to ensure that that has been done. Now, in that case, you are able to constantly review what you're doing and constantly make sure that you're acting in a timely manner. But outside of that, you need to have what is called a contingency plan. Why contingency? Because it is very rare that a plan works perfectly. Either somebody gets sick, either some resource is missing, something happens, and you have to have something as a backup. So that, okay, Mr. X gets sick, then we know Mr. Y can fill in for him, and we call up Mr. Y and say, Mr. Y, you fill in for this person now because he's sick. So you always have to have this contingency plan in order for it to be sure to deliver on time. Finally, the plan must be clear to everyone. It's a wonderful thing if you have a beautiful plan and if everything is in place, structures are in place and so on. But that plan must be clear to everyone involved. If that plan is not clear to them, then you're going to have a problem. Okay, because Mr. X thinks he has to do this, when in truth and in fact, you want him to do that. And there you have a problem. So the plan must be clear to everyone. Finally, in that plan, this is something which is very important to every focal point. Make sure that you consider the clearing procedure and submission of the report. What do I mean by that? A national report is something from the country, it's something from the government. And each country has a clearing procedure. It either has to go to the minister or it has to go to the cabinet, I do not know. But these things take time. So you have to ensure that you take into consideration the clearing procedure, okay? And that you understand how this is submitted. Once you have all of that in place, then you can put your plan to work. You see, the internal procedures in a country differs. This is why I cannot say what would happen, for example, in Barbados, or what would happen in Uganda, or what would happen, let us say, in Eastern Europe. I cannot say that. Each country have their own internal procedure. But this is an important thing. So, in summing up, we can say this, that first and foremost, in dealing with planning, think first and foremost of deadline time, 30th of June as it stands now. Secondly, think about the substance needed. In other words, the information, the correct information that needs to be in the report. Thirdly, think about the resources needed, meaning the human resource, the institutional capacity, and of course the financial resource. Fourthly, remember that delivery on time is important. It's crucially important. If this is not done, then your report might not be considered at the CRIC because it came in too late. But above all things, remember that there must be leadership in the process. If there's no leadership in the process, then it is not focused, it is not targeted, and therefore you might not achieve the objective. Finally, I want to say, apart from this lecture, as you know, the course has reading materials, and please check the reading materials, they will further guide you, and also that we do have a team at the Capacity Building Marketplace to support you in your efforts as regards participation in this course. Thank you very much, and see you next time.